Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. Today is episode number 124. I'm your host, Phil Huber. Today, we're going to be talking about when projects go sideways and some other tool updates that we have going on here and news and notes from the Woodsmith and PopWood world. Special thanks to Shaper Tools. They're the sponsors of today's episode, and they make that Shaper Origin. You've probably seen it. It's the handheld CNC router. It brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. Tackle joinery, cabinetry, hardware installation, and more with speed and precision. You can try it risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Just check out shapertools.com to learn more.
All right, before we start this, I gotta mention, I got a message on Facebook last night from Kevin Thomas down at Kansas City Woodworkers Guild. Said, hey, just wanted to let you know that I am trying the Phil Huber edge gluing plywood method. And I just sent him back a picture of me scowling at him. So that's what I think about that.
Edge gluing plywood is where it's at, man.
Yeah, that's what you tell me.
I mean, in theory, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just gluing wood together.
There's lots wrong with it. Would you, okay, hold on. This is a good argument here. Okay. I didn't mean to go down this rabbit hole, but would you, in the store, knowing that there were sheets of plywood that came from the manufacturer edge glued, would you knowingly grab one of those and buy it?
Do we know that they're not?
No, but we can make the assumption that those plies do not have a uniform seam down the center.
Right.
I mean, plies themselves may have seams.
Yeah.
Is the glue joint weaker because half of that edge is technically in grain?
But how much weaker? Okay,
right.
Here's a question. Have you ever done a plywood case and then just glued on a face frame to it?
No, I usually pocket screw.
Yeah, I've done it. But like, how structural is the face frame? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
just kind of depends.
The pieces that I've made, that joint isn't structural.
No.
Okay.
No.
It's just
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Mm-hmm. Just like there's nothing wrong with being a vegan. It just...
It's not for you?
It's not for me.
Yeah. The only problem I would have is trying to get the pieces lined up enough that's like I'm not removing veneers to get it smoothed out.
Which is why I use biscuits often.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I use biscuits
or splines
all the time. Yep.
Yeah.
Anywho,
or I think you could also use those edge jointing router bits.
See, I'm down with that.
Because I think Rob's doing an article on that for this next issue of the magazine.
Yeah.
And
are we talking like the finger joint bit?
Not the finger joint one. It's the
bird's mouth, or
not the bird's mouth either. No. It's the. I mean, they're called like an edge glue bit. It's. No, that's more of a Avatar Last Airbender sort of a thing.
That is true. True story.
Kind of looks like a locking rabbit joint, like the locking rabbit joint glue bits.
Okay. See, I'm down with the feather, like the feather finger joint type thing. I'm down with that. Like, I think that's cool. I'm good with that. I'm not down with this witchcraft voodoo you guys are doing, though.
I haven't done it yet. I'm not saying that I won't do it.
He's sitting back, seeing how this game plays out.
Yeah.
He's trying to decide which team he's playing for.
Right.
So today's topic, when projects go sideways, and I have a couple examples that I'll share over the course of the episode, but I'm going to start with a project that I made like 13 years ago.
Okay.
And it's a cabinet I made for my sister-in-law in the mid-century style. She has a strong affinity for the mid-mod look. And I saw the overall form in a fine woodworking magazine. I think I posted about this on Facebook like years ago. I really liked it, so I thought I'd make this for her. There were some fun challenges in it. Not least of all, one of the challenges was the fact that I was struggling with gallbladder issues at the time. So I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a gallbladder attack, and like no position was comfortable. Can't lay on my side, can't lay on my back. So what I would do is I would go downstairs to my workshop and work on this cabinet at like 1 in the morning. And so I refer to it as my gallbladder cabinet. Anyway, it's kind of a cube, and it has like a floating base on it. And for the base, if you can picture this, or the feet are like the blank size was like 3 inches square, connected with a rail to another foot, and then 2 stretchers to another set of rail and 2 feet. The feet kind of arc down. I'll send a picture on the show notes page so people can visualize what I'm trying to say here. Because my hand motions on the YouTube version is probably not really going to cut it.
Oh, I mean, basically, if you're watching on YouTube, just turn the sound off and watch his hand motions. It explains the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's basically sign language.
Yeah.
So anyway, on the YouTube version, I'm holding up the template for what the foot looks like. And I knew the connection between the rail and this foot was going to be a little fraught. So I did it's kind of like a stub tenon and groove joint that I did on it originally. Anyway, the cabinet turned out fantastic, looks great. Gave it to my sister-in-law. She adores it. Somewhere in there, their oldest child climbed on this cabinet, and 1 or more of the feet snapped right at that glue joint, where the rail it's essentially a tongue and groove joint, because there was no shoulder on the tenon, top or bottom. I just didn't feel like I had enough space for it to have a tenon if I did shoulders. So it got re-glued over the years, and eventually all 4 of the legs have failed. My brother-in-law's tried to dowel them just with some 1/4-inch dowels to reinforce it, and it just wasn't cutting it. So just recently I rebuilt the entire frame, but the only thing that I used were the 2 front to back ash stretchers. Then the rest of it's walnut. So I redid that with I beefed up. So I have 2 versions of the template. One where the foot to rail joint is at 1 inch, and then the other one where the foot to rail joint is 1.5 inches. At 1.5 inches now, I put in 2 3/8 inch dowels that go in like 1.5 inches. So they're 3-inch long dowels altogether. So I feel like that joint is quite a bit strengthened. And then, so those rails now are 1.5 inches wide, and then the front to back stretchers, I put in stopped dados on the back side and then reinforced that joint with a dowel too. Should I have done something similar when I built this originally? Yep. But sometimes you just never know what the life of a piece is going to be.
Yep. Live and learn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's kind of telling, I guess, in my woodworking world that I just kind of expect things to go awry, just from the fact that this last Green and Green bookcase project that we did over 2 episodes in 3 weeks, we were just kind of surprised that nothing was going awry. Like, it was just going well. And we just kept like, why is this going well? What's going to happen?
Yep.
When's the anvil going to fall on our heads?
And I think John and I said that as we were working, like, what's going to happen? Like, this should
what is
not
this
go
witchcraft?
Together. Like this should not go together this easily. What's going to happen?
Yep.
Yeah, because I was on vacation for a week, and you guys shot the case and the top, and then doing the green and green style ebony plugs and the exposed splines like on breadboard ends. And I got back, and the case looks fantastic.
Thank you.
And it's not surprising because you guys do great work, but like it just looks really good, even unfinished, like totally unfinished. That's an awesome bookcase.
Yep.
So then I built the doors on it, and by built the doors, I did the joinery, and John had prepped all the parts to length and width. But I glued up the doors, trying to be as square as possible, and A, they came out pretty square. B, they fit that case like a hand in a glove. Like there wasn't a lot of fine tuning, in terms of like angled shim cuts in order for those two doors to go in tight. We still needed to, trim them for gaps for hinges and closing and stuff like that. But darn it, they just went right in. And the same thing with the drawers. When Chris did the drawers on them.
Yeah, I think the closest thing we came to a screw up was the muttons on the doors. I was cutting the dados and rabbits to get those to fit in to the inside of the doors, and I cut the rabbit on the ends was supposed to be on the opposite side of the dados, and I cut them on the same side. So there's just a couple pieces that I had to redo, but that wasn't any big deal. It's small pieces
those
of
are
wood to
3/4 by a half, and
we did not use the proper back on that case though. I mean, not that that's wrong. No, it's supposed to be 1/2 inch mahogany plywood.
Yeah.
However, none of our suppliers could get 1/2 inch mahogany plywood. So instead we used 1/4 inch mahogany plywood. It was not listed in the plans correctly. We always in Woodsmith have our cutting list and our cutting diagram and stuff, and then we also need however many sheets of whatever. 1/2 inch plywood was not listed in there. 1/4 inch was, so I assumed that was for the back. However, when we started reading the actual material list, noticed that it was 1/2 inch ply. So we might have been able to get it if we would have noticed up front. But the only difference, in my opinion, between the 1/2 inch ply and the 1/4 inch ply is you kind of get that tinny sound with the 1/4 inch ply. Like you get that, the wah 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 kind of the wobble. You don't get the rigidity, but not that big a deal.
Yeah. But you could glue two pieces of 1/4 inch ply together, laminate them,
face glue it in this instance.
Face glue it,
yeah,
and get 1/2 inch plywood.
You could, yes. And I'm
we were talking about that. If we were gonna put a 1/4 inch back in that, we would have put like a middle style in it. But then it starts messing with the shelf geometry and all that stuff. So, but it's fine.
This and here is why I think that it is rather amazing that John and I did not F this up, because this is the case of offset grooves, dados, and mortises. Like, there is nothing on this that is like centered. There is nothing on this that is like centered on each other. Like, each leg is completely different from the other legs. There's weird notches that wrap around the corners. Like, there's just a lot of stuff. But my God, we did it. That was was that 4th of July week?
Yeah, I think that was week after 4th of July.
Yeah, because I had gone to Wisconsin to see my little baby niece.
Yep. So, no, see, and I brought this up, this topic up because I know, Phil, you had been working on that case that you were talking about earlier. And this weekend, We've decided to move our youngest kid out of our two kids have been sharing a bedroom, and then they had a toy room, and it's kind of been like, I want my own room. I want him out of my room. So we were like, okay, time to split the children. And that involved, converting the toy room back into a bedroom, painting it, whatever, but also involved breaking out the crib I built for my oldest. It was a Wood Magazine project. It was a 3-in-1 crib, so it is a crib style that has a, front and a back, 2 short sides for the crib, but then you also make a set of bed rails that will turn it into like a full-size bed. And I built it out of walnut. It's pretty nice. I like the design of it. I do wish the footboard in bed form was a little shorter, but it is what it is. It was a crib. Is what it started as. So, anyways, it involved breaking that out. I did not realize it involved actually breaking it. What I had done when I stored it last, because I'm thinking I'm a smart guy, right? So I'm like, where can I store this footboard and headboard, the 2 bed rails, the crib mattress, the crib box spring, and then the 2 crib sides? I'm like, where can I store all these that they're out of the way? I'm not going to put them in the attic because I don't want to climb up there. I'm in my back room you know what? I got floor joists up here. I should screw eye bolts into the floor joists and ratchet strap them MFers up there, and then they're stuck to the ceiling. They're not in the way. And that worked great until I went to get them down this weekend. So, I undid one ratchet strap, and everything's walnut. It's all suspended. So, I got the in order of layers, I had, the mattress, I had the mattress, the box spring, or the crib, spring, the suspended crib spring thing, the 2 crib halves, the footboard, the headboard, okay? So these are all suspended, ratchet strapped tight to the ceiling. And then I had, in between the floor joists, ran the 2 bed side rails, So I handed those down to my wife. I undid one of the ratchet straps, and I tied a stop knot in it, thinking, okay, in case this starts sliding, it's not going to fall to the ground. Tied a stop knot in it. Then I reached for the second strap. And as soon as I, undid the ratchet strap just a hair, you guys see where this is going, everything came crashing to the ground. One of the crib side rails had split apart. Now the only thing holding those 2 side rails together, the top and bottom halves, are these slats, and those slats were halfway glued into the mortises, so it's those kind of started racking and broke apart a little bit. Not that I'm ever planning on using it as a crib again, but I dinged the crap out of the headboard when it fell. It was one of those huge dents in it, golf ball sized dents, and smashed up one of the edges pretty good. And my wife's like, "Wow," she was just so distraught over it. And I'm like, well, she was distraught over it for me because I had built it, and I'm like, you know what? It's happens. It's gonna happen. Whatever, But it was one of those. It's I got it, brought it upstairs, set it all up, grabbed some 240 grit sandpaper, scuffed up got through the dents and dings, smoothed out where the edges had kind of peeled away a little bit, so my kid's not gonna get a walnut splinter. But then I just grabbed the iron and a wet rag and went to town steaming dents out. Worked great. I could see where I dented it up a little bit, and I actually still had the cans of, I used, I think Rockler, maybe it's Woodcraft. Somebody sells a Sam Maloof brand finish. It's the poly varnish. Oh, yeah,
Rockler does, yep.
Rockler. I still had 2 cans of it from when I had finished this thing originally, so after I steamed all these dents out, I went back and resanded them real quick in the bedroom and wiped a layer of finish over top of them. Psh, can't see it. It's one of those things, don't cry over spilt milk, don't cry over dropped headboards. So,
and the best thing about putting a fresh finish on it, the kid really slept well that night.
I can see you had something to stew in there, John. It's like when you're holding a baby and you know he's working on a big load in his pants.
Yeah, that's exactly
it's that same type of face that John gets when he's holding something back. Yep.
I'm not smiling. It's just gas.
So I don't know. I just thought it was interesting because I feel like after we finish projects, if a project stays in your house, I feel like after you finish a project, there's at some point going to be something else that needs touched on that project, right? Like it's never going to be it'll be finished, but you'll have to do something, whether it is a small repair, whether it is a reapplication of a finish. My nightstands in the bedroom back here just have a straight linseed oil finish on them, and I've applied linseed oil to them 3 times in the year and a half they've been done. So it was just kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. That's why John doesn't finish projects, because then he doesn't have to ever go back to them.
That's right. Yeah, like what you said, any project that's stayed in my house, it gets about like 90% done, where it's like fully functional, but the last 10% doesn't get done unless it's like, oh, we're moving, I better finish that trim around the base of the kitchen cupboards, or we have a graduation coming up, I gotta finish this up. Or so 90% of the way there, the last 10% is the hardest. So
today's episode is brought to you by Shaper Tools. They're the makers of the Shaper Origin, the handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. You can tackle joinery, cabinetry, hardware installation, and more with speed and precision. You could try it risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Visit shapertools.com to learn more. I think the longer a project sits, the harder it is to do some of the stuff that fits on the inside, like doors and drawers.
Oh, yeah.
Like I did some kitchen cabinets for our previous house, and I do not like, and this is totally personal preference, but I do not like the look of frame and panel drawer fronts.
Okay.
So I just did solid wood slab fronts.
Why that?
And I had kind of a deeper drawer on one side, and it looked great, operated well until summer, and then it kind of stuck a little bit. So then you just plane a little bit. I had to pop the drawer front off and plane it back a little bit and get it to fit. And and sometimes with cabinets that have doors in it, even if it's like a bookcase cabinet, if you put it in someplace and the floor is a little warped, that's going to affect the fit of the doors.
Yep.
So,
it kind of working on that crib or bed, kind of made me think. Like, do you guys keep I'm pretty sure Phil does. Do you guys keep a journal of projects you've built and notes on them?
I don't usually. Yes, I don't really keep a journal of notes of stuff as I've built them. It's more of little drawings. They're napkin sketches of what I used to build the project.
Sure.
But then at the back of that notebook, I keep a list of every project I've made every year by year.
Gotcha. See, now I asked this because, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but I'm pretty confident. Like, I'm going to remember what I did on that project. So as I am...
Nope.
Well, as I'm applying... I know this crib, I spent so much time on this. This was like my first... It wasn't my first fine woodworking project, but it was my first project I built at my home shop.
Sure.
9 years ago or whatever. All my other big projects I had built in a community shop in school and stuff. So I spent a lot of time, intimately with this crib. So I remember what I did as far as finish. I remember sanding it up to 400 grit. I remember all that. But I started thinking, as I build these projects, I really should like keep a notebook of like what mainly what finish I used. Because if I ever have to go back and touch it up, it's really beneficial to know what you applied to it. If you built a dining room table and you're like, oh crap, I can't remember if that was wipe on poly satin, if it was wipe on poly gloss, I can't remember what I used. And then if you touch it up with the wrong thing, you're gonna see it. So or maybe it's as simple as non-discreetly somewhere on the project you write, wipe on poly, 95 or whatever, 1995.
Right. Like underneath of a drawer or back side of the project, or but then you forget where you wrote it.
That's fair. Like I've seen where people have been like taking light switch covers off and writing room paint numbers, inside the light switch. So it's like, oh, hey, I have the code. I can go back and get paint to touch it up or whatever. I was like, it would be kind of nice to be able to do that somewhere on projects. If it's a Woodsmith project, it's spray lacquer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I found I have my shop notebook here. These are my working drawings for that mid-century modern cabinet that I did. Not that one. That one for my sister-in-law. That's it. Completed 1109.
Wow.
Okay.
See, that's more impressive.
Much to go on there, but
that's more impressive to me that you haven't. I would lose my notebook. Like I would lose.
No, I carry it around all over, and then there's like the list. That's from 2009 of projects, because I divide them up by, like shop projects, furniture projects, gift projects, tools and shop.
See, I still have a project from 2008 that I haven't finished, so dang.
Yeah. It's fun. Sometimes it's fun to flip through and look at where I was at one point. It's kind of a time machine.
Yeah.
So another project that I did recently, I did a video edition build for it, was a bookcase for my woodworking books. And it's part of my vegan woodworking series that I've been going through, using the same fir that I used on my workbench project. And it's a pure delight to work with that material, because with a sharp chisel, you can pretty much pound your way right through just about anything on it. If you wanted to make notches or through mortises or something, you can hand plane it for the most part pretty well. The only flaw that I discovered in making it is I had roughed out all the parts to get ready for the video edition filming days. Is several of, especially when they were in wider pieces, there were, I don't know if you call them splits or end checks or what have you. I think it was the wind shake.
I would call it wind shake.
Because it was the derecho tree, right?
Yep.
So a couple of my pieces had splits on the end, and then several of them, being a softwood, had very large, distracting knots where I didn't really want them. So I found that the wind shake pieces, especially since they weren't really what I would call structural where they were, I could just prime apart a little bit, squirt some Type Bond 3 down there, clamp it together, call it good. On one of them, it was on a shelf, and on the end of it, I used my biscuit joiner. So I just ran a slot for a number 20 biscuit and glued a biscuit in and then cut it flush when it was dry. Kind of an invisible bow tie joint, let's call it. And then for the knots, where I had those where I didn't really want to see it, I made a template, just a simple router template that was a square, slightly larger than the knot. And then I was able to route out a shallow pocket maybe 1/4 of an inch tops, probably like more like 3/16, and then cut little squares of a patch material. I could glue that in, plane it flush. Yep. And when you look at it, you can see it, but it's not.
It's not a knot.
I'm surprised on how well it turned out in terms, it's like I know that they're there and I see them, but I don't think people casually looking at it, your eye would pass over it pretty easily.
If anybody wants to see a photo of that, they can check out the September-October issue of Popular Woodworking Magazine, where we ninja'd that cabinet to take a photo of Phil's patch. Just saying.
And I did a special, like a breakout video on how I made those patches in the pockets for it. So,
So this brings up an interesting question that I've been meaning to ask you guys on the podcast. Who would you guys say within our group in the magazine, who has the most unusual... What?
Chris Fitch.
I was going to say, who has the most unusual woodworking methodology as far as like approach to techniques and tasks? I know who I would say most non-traditional, because I think you could say, okay, here is a technique, or here's a task that needs done on a project, and I would say we could probably all identify what would be the most direct and straightforward way to do that. But then we have some people that will maybe overcomplicate the process and do it a different way.
So most off like textbook, like there's a textbook way to do it.
Yes,
and then there's some
textbook
like
way. Yes,
I'd say Dylan probably. Is that
Is
that the correct answer?
Yep, that's the correct answer. Thank you, John.
He comes up with some very creative ways of doing things, and I'm always like impressed. Like I would not have thought of that, and maybe it's because I'm thinking inside the box.
Yep.
But yeah, he kind of goes off the rails on stuff.
Yeah, and it's not a bad. I mean, it's not a bad thing.
No.
Sometimes it's like that was weird, but sometimes it's like, I wouldn't have thought to do it that way. Not that I would do it that way after seeing that, but like that worked way better than I expected.
Yeah. I would agree with Dylan on there, and my prime example is one of his first projects for Woodsmith was that entryway bench.
Yeah,
like it almost looks like a built-in mudroom thing.
Yep.
I think it's one of the coolest pieces that we've done.
Yep.
And we did it for the TV show, and he did it all out of solid poplar, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
For the TV show, we did plywood.
Yep.
That John, I think, and in one of your most genius moves, John, I think you just basically edge banded the whole sheet and then just cut parts from it that way.
Yeah.
So we did it from plywood, which didn't really change anything about it. But then as we were going along, because of our compressed time limit, we were going to change the order of assembly on some things, because we just didn't get why or how Dylan had done something for the assembly. Because in our haste, it just seemed like this doesn't make sense. I would do it this way. So we did it that way, and we were getting through, and it was like, oh, that's why Dylan did it that way. And it actually is probably the better way to have done it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you go back and watch that episode on how we built it, Logan, Chris, and I, and then read through the plan, which illustrates how Dylan built it, you will see the subtle differences. And even if you choose to go with plywood, which is totally fine, build it the way Dylan did.
I don't even remember filming that episode. Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh no.
It was the old studio.
I know. I remember it. I couldn't tell you what part of that project I built.
Yeah.
Weird. Is this what old age is like?
I think that's just a lot of woodworking that blends together.
That's
right.
It's like,
yeah.
And you just black out for a little bit, and
Yep.
an episode gets done.
Well, and like you said, though, Logan, this is job you've held for the longest. So this is also this is called institutional memory.
There we go.
So you can remember a lot of things, but then a lot of other things just kind of blur together like the ingredients in a stew.
Yeah.
But I don't know. He was here. He was with Woodsmith for like, what, 3-4 years, and then you like took over PopWood. So is that like reboot? Is like a new job?
Kind of. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. And
you just pull out from one matrix and then plug into another one.
Phil made it sound like I got fired from my job. So I've never been fired from a job yet. So let's just be very clear on that.
I didn't say that.
Yeah.
I remember the barnwood. I do remember the barnwood.
No. Oh yeah, we used barnwood for the door on that, didn't we?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I totally forgot that.
I remember getting letters because we did. Did you do the video? We did like a video edition video on using barnwood.
I think it was Dylan did it when he built the original, cabinet. He talked about using barnwood.
Yeah, and then like using a wire brush to clean it off and all that kind of stuff. Because I got an email from somebody, a very concerned viewer, that we should not have shown cleaning out or using barnwood because of the possibility of there being anthrax in there.
Yeah.
So
cool.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Nice. Huh. Well,
it's no worse than walnut dust. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, now to John's point about walnut dust, I know
where this is going.
So I was working, you'll be surprised.
Okay.
So I'm working on that base, the new base for my sister-in-law's cabinet, and I discovered something about walnut in the fact that there were some sections, like the curved profile of the foot, I routed. And I did some finish sanding on it just to kind of make it a uniform surface. But I did a lot of hand work on it in terms of chopping mortises. Even drilling the holes is essentially hand work because what comes out are chips. And then I did some hand planing on it. And the smell of planed or chips of walnut is different to me than the dust created by a sander or a router.
Okay, that's not where I thought I was going.
And to me, I like the smell of the walnut shavings from a hand planed surface, or even just like when I said that I had chopped out those stop dados, compared to the smell / taste of the walnut dust.
And that's what gets me.
So
it's the dust.
And now I can sympathize with where John's coming. I still love the smell of walnut, but being able to find those two differences put me inside John's head a little bit.
See, I thought you were going to make mention, because you did yesterday, about what Rob was shooting some video yesterday in MDF. He was routing MDF.
Right. Yes.
And there was MDF dust everywhere. And Phil made
And why was that?
Well, the wrong bit.
Right. Because we had grabbed
the spiral down cut bit.
We can blame Rob on this because he's the new guy, probably.
Okay. Yeah, he's yeah.
But we were drilling bench dog holes with a plunge router.
Yep.
And he grabbed. We said we needed a spiral bit to do it through MDF, so he grabbed a spiral bit, and it turned out that it was a down cut spiral bit, which is less effective for drilling holes than you might think.
Yep.
It's better for punching holes than drilling holes.
Yes. But Phil made a comment as we are cleaning up, like, "Hey Logan, how does it feel to see this fine layer of dust all over everything and know that for once you're not the one that made that?" It's like, ouch, Phil. Ouch.
It's like that was a long time ago.
Yeah, like, I mean, yes, there was that one time I was working on this bed, and I used that huge 7518 router to sculpt the curved headboard.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That made an absolute chocolate brown layer of walnut dust in our shop. Like,
yeah, in the main Woodsmith shop.
Over everything.
Of unusual size. Yeah, that was... I'm going to take issue with your saying it was just one time, because I'm going to... Exhibit A is Logan Whitmer turns a bowling ball.
Okay, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Exhibit B, Logan Whitmer turns anything on the video studio set.
Hey, the people want what they want, Phil.
Right. No, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that it was just
That's
kind of
fair.
unusual.
No, that's fair.
That when Rob did this routing, that there was a fine layer. Yeah, and it was, and when he finally punched through with that downcut bit, we basically had cauterized a hole through the MDF, and then I went out. I think I had a meeting, or I don't know what it was, and then came back in, and having been out of the studio, the like roasty burned smell of walnut or of MDF dust had a very bacon aroma to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Huh. Well, you know. I mean, to be fair, well, not to be fair, too. I made this mistake in my shop about 5 months ago. I was doing some work with Micro Jig on their match fit clamps and turning like an outfeed table into kind of an assembly type table. So I routed like 36 dovetail slots in my MDF outfeed table. Oh my god. Like, my shop's in the basement. I had the door shut and there was MDF dust on my stove upstairs. So that was with air cleaners.
It gets everywhere. I don't know how it. Yeah.
Well, the thing with MDF is they take like a foot worth of sawdust and compress it down into 3/4 inch and add resin. And then when you route it, it's like taking that sawdust and just repoofing it and shooting it evereverywhere. And
right. It's like take out rice from a Chinese restaurant. Because they have it in that little pack, the little fold-up box. But when you take it out of there, it might say that it's a pint, but there's actually 2 gallons of rice in there.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
It's like what people don't realize about fire hydrants is that they're not really connected to the water mains. They just have dehydrated water in there.
Yes.
So that when you...
just add water.
Just add water.
It. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So...
yeah. One last thing before we wrap up. I saw on one of the Instagrams that Woodsmith Shop follows, a guy had a Felder sliding table saw, and then I showed you guys the dado attachment for it now, because I've always thought that those saws couldn't do dados because of European regulations, and all those saws are made in Europe. However, this Instagram video showed a dado, some kind of a dado blade on it. And it was a cutter head that had carbide insert cutters, not only as the teeth, but also arranged vertically as kind of like the chippers or sidewall, whatever, scoring blades. I just looked it up online from Felder, and it's an adjustable set, and it goes from 6.3 millimeters to 20 millimeters.
Okay.
Which in American is just under 1/4 of an inch to just over 3/4 of an inch, which is a pretty broad range.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get it in one of 2 diameters, 180 millimeters, about 7 inches, or 228 millimeters, just about 9 inches. And this Mamma Jamma is $1,100.
Woo! That's
American.
That's hefty.
Yeah. $1,100 American dollars.
Not metric dollars.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So that's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What's the arbor size?
What is the bore size on it? It's a bigger bore size. I think it's a 30 millimeter bore.
So, like, we could get it to work with a bushing.
Probably.
Okay. Done.
I mean, I would love to see it because I think it would be... It looks like a super cool... I'm going to put a link to it on the show notes page. And if anybody has ever used one of these, I would love to hear from you.
Or if anybody wants to buy us one.
Yeah, bore diameter. Right. Yeah. If anybody from Felder is listening to this, I'm sorry. And we would still love to have one of these. Yeah, the bore diameter is 30 millimeter. So a little bit larger than the 5/8.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Oh, as I say, a new 24-inch helical cutter head is like $3,500.
Oh.
Like, it seems expensive.
And why would you be looking at a new 24-inch helical cutter head?
Nobody will know, Phil, until next week.
Nobody?
Nobody.
Okay.
Especially my wife.
Stay tuned. And if your name is Elaine, stay extra tuned.
No.
I think that wraps up another episode of today of the Shop Notes Podcast. If you have questions, comments, or smart remarks, you can send us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com. Otherwise, leave a comment on our YouTube channel where you can watch the three of us do what we do best. And we'll see you next time on the Shop Notes Podcast. Special thanks to Shaper Tools for sponsoring podcasts this month. They make the Shaper Origin. It's that it's the unholy love child of a Star Wars droid and a router that gives you precise digital accuracy in your woodworking. You can try one of these risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Just go to shapertools.com to learn more. Bye, everybody.